Hi, everybody. This is Sal DiFusco, and welcome to Coffee Talk.
Everyone, I'm Kim Perlak. I'm the chair of the guitar department, and welcome to another Coffee Talk. And today we have, as usual, our assistant chair, Cheryl Bailey, with us.
Hello, everybody.
Hello.
And we've got our senior coordinator, Ian Steed, as usual.
Ian. Hello, Ian.
And then you're hearing our special guest today, Professor Sal DiFusco. Sal, welcome to Coffee Talk. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. This is awesome.
So, Sal, the first question everybody wants to know is, do you drink coffee, and how do you take your coffee?
I certainly do drink coffee. And, this is on YouTube. So, I do have one beef that I just want to get out in the open. I love this cup. This Berklee cup is awesome. I love the color. And I love the logo. The logo is great. I just have one beef, though.
Uh-oh.
It's not big enough. See, I usually use this in the morning.
Okay, if you're listening, I just want to say that if you're listening and you're not...
It's about 3 times the size.
Yeah, if you're not watching this, if you're listening instead, Sal has like sort of the giant...
#1 dad on there. Look at that. Isn't that nice?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like 3 times the size of the Berklee mug, which is already a big mug.
It's a big mug.
Now, I can only have that in the morning because otherwise I get the jitters wicked.
Sal, that is a serious amount of coffee that you take in. How many of those do you have?
No, so I don't really drink that much. I can't. But I do take it black. I usually have the Starbucks, what do you call it? The Pike's Place is my favorite. And we have the K-Cups. And I usually have 5 Truvia in my black coffee. And that's the way I like it.
Nice.
So it's sweet, but it's with the Truvia stuff, so not the real sugar. Keep my figure.
Did that develop over time? Did your coffee taste develop over time?
Oh, sorry. No, we've been doing that for a long time. My wife used to make the percolated stuff, but then we got the K-Cup thing, and that just works so much better, and it's so much easier. And of course, when I go to my parents' house, I have the espresso. You got to have the espresso because nobody can make it like my mother. I'm sorry. I hope my wife's not listening. But, the real Italian stuff. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, I love coffee.
So, Sal, the next question
Yeah.
we always ask is, could you tell us a little bit about your Berklee first days? Like, what was it like? What do you remember
So,
from first days?
going to school or teaching?
Well, you've had 2 different first days, so it would be interesting
Actually,
to hear.
3.
Oh, you've had 3. Could you tell us a little bit
Yeah.
about what you remember about each one?
Well, yeah. So, I started taking lessons at a young age, 5. So for about 10 years, I studied at this local, music school here in Medford. I grew up in Boston. And, I started getting serious about 15, and I called Berklee and I said, hey, could you hook me up with a private teacher? I want to study with a Berklee teacher, And they actually gave me Garrison Fuel's phone number. So this was got to be, I'm almost 60 now, so, 35 years ago. So, so I got Garrison Fuel's number, and, I started taking lessons from him, and, I would go over to Berklee, kind of sort of his after hours. I think he just started teaching there at that time. So that was kind of my first experience. I grew up in Boston, so, I was around a lot. So that was my first experience, and that was great. Then after studying with Garrison Fuel for a while, I actually hooked up with John Damian. And this was like in my 20s. And I started studying with him. I got really friendly with John, and he was cool. And so in 1980, when I graduated high school, I was actually all ready to come to Berklee. I was signed up, had the orientation fee paid, and I was going to start in 1980. But right at the last minute, I was supposed to start in September 1980. In August, this band asked me to join them. So I was like, oh, and they had all the high hopes of becoming famous and all this stuff. And we remember the Police, the band The Police, who drove around the country in a van. We were like, oh yeah, let's get a van, and let's drive around the country, man, and play all these clubs. So I actually decided the last minute not to go to Berklee in 1980. I joined his band, and lo and behold, I stayed in the band for 10 years. And finally, and during that time, I was studying with John Damian on and off when I was in town. And John would always talk to me. He said, "Dude, you should really consider going to Berklee. Go to the college. Really go and make it happen." And I was like, I don't know. So, but finally, it kind of it hit me, and I said, "Yeah, this is time. It's time for a change." This was 1990, so 10 years later, I decided to go to Berklee, and I was 27 years old when I started. So, but what was really cool, I mean, it's a different thing. I mean, I see the benefits of starting earlier, but it was kind of cool to go a little bit later because I already had 10 years of playing experience, on the road, and I knew a lot of the teachers. I was gigging with a good number of them, and so it was kind of a cool experience, but I was kind of older than everybody else, so it was a little weird, you know. But it kind of worked out good for me, and I'll tell you, my experience was it was just amazing. It was just such an amazing experience because I was in my little box for about 10 years, and I was in this band, and we were doing, chasing kind of all the trends of the 80s, trying to be famous. One month we were U2, the next month we were the what do you call it with the hair there, the Pelicans. I forgot what that. Forgot.
Flock of seagulls.
Flock of seagulls. Yeah, I mean, we were trying to be everybody. We
The
were
Pelicans.
We were chasing every trend, man. The flock of seagulls. That's the one, man.
They're both ocean birds, like
yeah, something like that. It reminds me of Scarface. Look at the Pelicans. But so what was I going to say? So it was, I was in that little box, but when I went to Berklee, it was like all of a sudden, man, the doors blew wide open. I'm playing with this Czechoslovakian drummer. I'm hanging with this, guy from Hungary. All the different cultures, all the different, perspectives of music I just didn't have because I was in such a small box of doing what we were doing. And so it was and John was right. It was exactly what I needed at the time. I'm a slow learner, so it took me 10 years to get there, but it really was. And that was the biggest part, I think, that really made the biggest difference for me was the networking, was meeting the people, seeing all the different musical instruments, all the different musical influences and cultures being brought in. It was just a wonderful, wonderful thing, and I loved it. I loved it.
It's interesting. I have a question for you just about what you've just said. I find it really interesting that when you started studying with a Berklee teacher, when you worked with Garrison, he wasn't really that much older than you.
No,
you were such
right.
a young teacher, and you were a very young person. And then later, when you came back, you were an older student.
Yes.
And that is fascinating that you got to have both of those experiences. Like, what do you think first you learned as a teenager from having a teacher who was a Berklee professor but really very young? Because Garrison started teaching at Berklee in his early 20s. Like, was there something impactful about that you can put your finger on?
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, I think the jazz training, I mean, Garrison was just, a phenomenal jazz musician. So, that was kind of my first exposure to that kind of training, at least. So that was great, but it was just good to, I mean, he would share a lot about what he was doing and his experience at Berklee and his teaching there. So it was just great, I mean, it was, they became really good friends. And then, of course, when we became colleagues, it was even more awesome. But
Mhm.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, I learned a lot from those guys. John Damian, mostly, I would say, because I spent the most time with him, which was great. We were also gigging together too. We were doing a lot of duo stuff, and back then, we would do these little, Christmas parties at these clothing stores. We'd have our Christmas hats on. We'd play these duos, these jazz duos. It was just so much fun. We had a steady gig down in Faneuil Hall, and and then we'd go to Buzzy's roast beef, man, after the gig, and and we would just talk so much. I just learned so much from that guy. I miss the both of them, so much. But
Yeah, I
did
bet.
that answer your question? I don't even know if I answered that
I
answered your
think it
question.
did because I think because your ages were so close,
Right.
you were learning from them as master players, but you were also close to the same age, and so as you kind of grew exponentially in your skill set, then you kind of became friends with them and hanging with them,
Yeah.
and there wasn't really a generational difference. You were there were a number of years, but that number of years gets smaller as you get older. So
Yeah.
it sounds
That's
like
true.
you had some kind of instant colleagues in your teachers because of the age range.
Yeah, that's a
Really
good
interesting.
point. Well, back then, because I was 15, it still seemed like he was so much older than me, even though he really wasn't. But then when we became colleagues, it was like, gee, you're really not that much older than me. Gosh, wait a minute. But to me, he was like a god. I was 15, and going over to his house in Brookline, and it was awesome. But
Do you think that there are specific things that you took from having like a colleague relationship with your teachers and also maybe being an older student when you came formally to Berklee? Were there things about those experiences that translate specifically into how you teach or how you look at teaching now that you're a professor?
um, let me see if I understand the question. So my experience of going there a little bit older.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm not sure. If it affected my teaching. I mean, I do think that, yeah, well, I would say yes, because I did have a different perspective coming at it from having a little bit more experience going to Berkeley. So yeah, I do see that. And because I was a little bit older when I went and had a little bit more experience, I was exposed to a lot of cool things. Like they had me play the singer showcases, the commencement concerts, different things like that. That was really kind of cool. So I tell my students to try to get as much involved in those type of things as they can. You know what I mean? Because those experiences are so priceless. To be able to do whatever, service to the college as a student, I think is cool. So I had a unique, opportunity, I guess. But I guess I try to stress to my students to look for those opportunities. Don't just be a spectator, get involved. So I would say from that perspective, yes.
What do you think are the things that you learn by doing those things? Like maybe there's some of the similar things you learned from being a professional for 10 years. Like what are the kind of intangibles that you learned from doing those kinds of performances and gigs?
Oh, I mean, it's the real deal. It's school, but it's the real world school. And I think that's just such an important part. And I do stress that also to my students too. Whatever opportunity you can to perform. Even if it means doing free gigs, going to a nursing home, whatever, because you're going to learn stuff on a gig that you're just not going to learn in a classroom. Now, you need to learn what you need to learn in the classroom, but unless you're putting that out there and getting the feedback, it's not going to stick. So that's a very important aspect to it, I think. And again, I think I had a very unique situation where I had that kind of experience going in. So I do stress that. I do stress that to my students. Play, man. And I do a lot of playing with my students all the time. I like doing that. We always try to reserve some time, 10 minutes at least, to play some tunes, because it's important. You're learning all the vocabulary, all the different things, but if you're not applying it, then you don't really feel like you're making the kind of progress that. But when you hear it coming out and playing on a tune, kind of like what me and Cheryl did yesterday, oh, what a treat that was! Oh, that was awesome. You feel good. You feel good about like, hey, okay,
Yeah.
it makes sense what I'm learning. So
Yeah, it sounds like in a way, because you were seen as a young colleague to your teachers, you've brought that into the way that you see your students.
I believe so. Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's interesting. Cheryl, what's on your mind at this point?
Um, well, in talking to you in the past, Saul, um, we talked about when you were coming up, in an Italian family, and everything was about songs. And you
Mm.
learned all those songs and melodies. And when I think of your playing, I mean, besides all the diverse styles that you do, I think about how melodic you are. And I know maybe caught you here and there, and I hear you working on sort of melodic development with students. So I just was curious of your thoughts about that and how you work on that with students. And, I mean, that obviously permeates you from your early childhood experience of, play me a song. Um,
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, I wish I could remember the songs. But yes, I've learned a lot of songs. I just have a hard time remembering them. No, I can remember a few of them anyway. But yeah, no, I think you're right. When I was growing up and started playing guitar from a young age, I studied with a teacher that he wasn't that great as far as vocabulary and jazz language or whatever, but he did stress learning songs, and to me that was a really good thing because it enabled me to start gigging pretty early in life. Um, I was by the time I was 15, 16, I was doing gigs already. I was doing 3, 4 weddings. Back then was the GB scene was kind of big as it is now, although it's a whole different bag these days. But it enabled me to, hey, I know songs, so I can work. So I always had that kind of mentality, like I told you before, kind of that blue collar mentality of, hey, somebody was asking me, goes, so you a jazz guitar player? Are you a rock guitar player? I'm like, I think I created my own genre called pay the bills genre. I'm a pay the bills guitar player. How's that? So that was kind of ingrained in me from a young age. And I see that a lot. I see a lot of students come in and they might have even a ton of technique, but if you ask them to play a song, they'll look at you like, huh? I mean, anything, autumn leaves, something, and they'll look at you with the blank kind of look. Now, I'm not saying that that's the end all, that you need to know all these standards or anything like that. I mean, I know it's a whole different age that we're dealing with, and I don't want to be an old fogey, old fashioned dude. But I do think as far as me personally, I think it really helped my development in learning songs early on, pieces of music, which was great. And I do try to stress that with my students. I do, there's always a period of time, like I said, that we set aside or we're working on one tune or some tune. Hey, here's your exercises, here's your proficiency, but hey, let's have a tune that you're working on, and that helps. So when they come back, we can play the tune and then add another tune and then add another tune. I often say, think about it. If you learn one new tune a week in 52 weeks, you're going to have 52 songs. That's pretty cool. You do that for 2 years, that's 100 songs. Hey, that'll cover most gigs right there. So,
Well, also, it reminds me of Joe Past. I saw him when I was a kid, and he said something to the point of by improvising is creating melody on the spot. So the more melodies that you know, the more you have to draw on, and that's kind of what you're doing there. You know, you learn all these melodies. It teaches you about phrasing, about just good melodic construction, and that's going to influence everything you do moving forward in terms of creating melody. So that really hit me when I heard that from Joe Past, who had a
wow.
similar kind of upbringing where, you know, his family would get together and go, "Hey, Joe, play some songs, some pretty songs," you know. And so he was always about playing melodies and harmonizing melodies and stuff. And so I hear that in your playing so clearly, that
Thank you.
just that you
Thank you.
have that wealth of song melodies inside.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, that was really the way that I first started improvising, was just embellishing the melody. You know, you'd play a melody, and then if it was time to solo, I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to solo, so I would just embellish the melody a little bit. And I think that's what you're talking about. And then I came to learn that that's a very powerful tool in learning how to improvise. But I didn't know it at the time. It's just the only thing I knew how to do, you know. But, you know, you hear cats doing that, um, taking melodies, embellishing them, you know, taking motifs and using them within the solo. It's a really cool thing. You're right. I mean, you're very, very right about that. Yeah, it's huge. Yeah.
You know, another aspect of your playing that I think jumps out as people hear you is just your tremendous facility. You have a tremendous ability to play like the most intricate rhythmic things at a hugely high velocity. But
You got
the
chops, man.
yeah, man, that's how you say it.
Uh,
You got chops, but
you guys are way too nice.
but
Very encouraging.
do it in this way where every time I watch you, I remind myself I have to go home and practice breathing so that I can have the lyricism and the breathing that you have, because you are relaxed. You're like, you're doing it
Oh,
like it's just flowing. And and so I think that there's a misconception sometimes when people feel like, well, you're either a lyrical player or you have these chops. And you have both things. And so I'm wondering
thank
if
you.
you, well, you're welcome. But I'm wondering, like, could you give people some insight into that? Like, maybe how you kind of developed your playing, but also the way you think about lines and melody.
Wow.
How do you
These are some
develop those things?
deep
Yeah.
questions, deep questions, which I don't know. I just had this really quick thought. That thing that you guys did yesterday was awesome. That webinar, by the way. I mean, that was really, that was some deep waters, man. So I just wanted to throw that out there. I really enjoyed that.
And I want to say for
Um,
the people who are listening that the webinar he's referring to is our panel on rhythm. It was a faculty panel on rhythm, and you can find it on our YouTube channel. And it had four of our colleagues talking with Cheryl and I about how to approach different aspects of rhythm in your playing and time.
yes, yes. And I bring that up because, you know, there was a lot of very deep things talked about. You know, so for speed, of course, you know, it's practice on your instrument, you know, exercises. You know, I started with the Berklee method books. You know, I must have went through the Berklee 1, 2, and 3, 3 or 4 times, you know, in my practicing career. And, you know, working with the metronome and then getting a lot of different exercises on vocab. I'm very big on vocabulary and really shedding my scales. I studied with, after when I started Berklee in 1991, I also started studying with Charlie Banakis. And that's why I feel this kindred spirit with Mike Stern, because we both studied with the same teacher. And, you know, Charlie was very, very big on, you know, the vocabulary, the exercises, the permutations, the and all of that sort of thing, the arpeggios, the tensions, the every which way to do it. So whether it be horizontal, vertical, the whole 9 yards, he was just all about that. So, uh, and he would always have me push tempos. And so I would practice slowly, but he would also tell me, you can't stay there. You got to push to tempo. So he would have me like shed giant steps at 300. I mean, Coltrane didn't even do it at 300. I mean, he was like at 280, 285, Not that I can play giant steps great or anything. I'm still shedding it. But, he would have you push it, even if it didn't sound that great, just to get your tempos up. And whether that's good or bad, I'm not sure. That's the Charlie Banakis method, but it did help me to build up some speed in these lines. I think the fluidity that you're talking about, that's a whole nother thing. And I got to say, I really appreciate you saying that, because it's something that I've been really, really striving to work on, because I'm a very fearful person. I have a lot of anxiety. I have a lot of, doubt. I have insecurities. And I think a lot of times in the past, that can really get in the way of my playing. And even, what they were talking about yesterday with time, one of the biggest thing that affects my time is just nervousness. It's, just anxiety, fear. That's a big, huge thing. And so I'll be honest, in the last whatever amount of time, I've been working really, really hard at that. And it's not even playing my instrument. It's just working on what's between my ears, and I do that, today through meditation. I meditate every day for about a half an hour. That helps. I read, inspirational materials. I pray. I got to do a lot to manage my anxiety, because it gets in the way. It can really get in the way. And here I am, I'm a 60-year-old guy. I can imagine a student. I'll never forget when I walked into my first proficiency, and it was a guy I knew, it was John Damien, and I was still, shaking, and it's tough. So I really feel for students and their nervousness and their anxieties. But, I want to give students hope. It is something that you can work on. And it's not something that you work on here. It's not something that you work on with a metronome. It really is working on what's going on in between the old noggin, between the ears. So I journal a lot. I see a therapist, things like that. I got to manage that stuff, because it does affect my playing. It just does. And but I think we all got to certain levels and certain degrees, insecurities and doubts and fears and anxieties. And I think for a musician, you got to work on it, or at least I can speak for myself. I had to. I can imagine as a classical guitar player. I mean, if I make mistakes, it's kind of like, oh, whatever, you're a jazz rock guitar player, make a mistake, whatever. I can imagine as you probably know tons more than me about that whole realm. I mean, I couldn't imagine being a classical player and having that would drive me crazy. But so maybe, you can expound a little on that yourself. Like, what do you do to manage your anxiety? I don't think you have any, Kim. I mean, you're always so relaxed. I don't know how you do it.
Well, I think you and I are embarking on the same work, because I could have said the same thing about you. You just always seem to me like super positive and centered and confident, and just, here are all my skills. I'm here to bring them to whatever situation. So I've tried to take a page, honestly, from colleagues like yourself who have that approach, and look at it like a learning experience, right? Like, what are all the things you have to do to manage what we have to do? But I completely relate to everything you're saying. I think it's so important that you said that, because first of all, I don't think there's anybody who would ever watch you play or hear you play that would ever guess
Mm.
that you are managing that issue. And
Well,
so I
thank you.
think,
That's probably the biggest compliment you can give me. I really, I appreciate that a lot. I really do because you know how it is that, it can be debilitating. It really can. And,
yeah.
it's just kind of nice to make progress. And it's slow progress. It's not an easy. But I think if students, if I could give students any kind of advice, is to get on that early, you know?
Yeah, I think that's the one thing that studying in classical music school, you have to get it on it early because you're always a soloist.
Mm,
And you're always like, I mean, as a classical
mm,
guitarist, you play chamber music, but the chamber music is very challenging for a guitarist because of the nature of our instrument.
mm.
When you're playing with violinists or cellists or flutists, they're used to reading single lines. They've been reading these lines for their whole lives. They anticipate what's there. Maybe if it's new music, there are some extended techniques or approaches that aren't the same. But the guitar part would be, what would be so dense and thorny and contrapuntal, and you can't just read it down. You would have to work on it, or you'd have to be able to kind of fake your way through it. So there was that anxiety of going where you knew that, like, oh my gosh, I'm going to be hacking away, and then someone is going to come in and sight read this. And then when you're a soloist, you have to play super complex things that you memorize by yourself on a stage alone.
Mm.
And the whole style is sort of centered around, being perfect. Like someone like just flubs a note, doesn't hit it exactly, or like, oh yeah,
Oh,
like they didn't get that. So I think because of the nature of that, though, what you're saying, everything you laid out, I can completely relate to that. My very early undergrad teachers were like, you have to meditate. You have to learn how to
wow.
breathe. You
Mm.
have to take care of your body. So they would say, like, do a soft martial art like Tai Chi or something, so that you're moving your body and you understand how your larger muscle groups work with your smaller muscle groups, and you're breathing and you're meditating. And then you have to bring that to your practicing every day. You have to integrate those things. Um,
Awesome.
Everything you're saying
Awesome.
about like taking walks and journaling and getting to
Mm.
know yourself, and how your non-musical problems affect your musicianship,
Big time.
because you know
Big time.
even what you and Cheryl were talking about like learning more songs, or like if you want to play lyrically, you have to know songs. Like, we would have teachers say, well, you're 19, and you haven't even had a tremendous breakup at this point. So if you're going to play this really sad 19th century music, you're going to have to read like Proust or Dostoevsky or something, like some heavy dark literature, and all these teenagers like reading this heavy stuff, like, oh my goodness. But then when you go to
Right.
play, it's like, you can't have all the experiences unless you study. And so that experience that you and Cheryl were talking about listening and learning
Yes.
materials and the traditions, and
Right.
then managing yourself, because once you add all that up, it's so much to be responsible for, and then you're young, and then you don't want to look like you don't know what you're doing, but you are going to not know what you're doing at some time, so you have to manage
Scary. Yeah.
all of the scary anxiety. It's
That's
so
true.
true. And what's so great, I think, for students listening to this is we all experience it, but you don't necessarily think your teachers are experiencing it, and they
There you
are.
go. Yeah, they are.
We're just
And
more comfortable with being uncomfortable, Sal. That's the difference between
maybe,
us.
maybe. And you hit two important things too, I think. Exercise, eating right. To me, maybe because I'm getting older, I don't know, but it's just such an important part of my life now. I mean, I'm at the gym almost every morning at 5 a.m. I get up early and and I eat 3 meals a day, and I don't eat in between no matter what. And I lost about 60 pounds. I used to be a pretty heavy guy, and that made a really huge difference for me too. My playing, huge. So there's a lot of different aspects to being a musician than the actual notes you play or techniques that you practice. So I agree with that. It's huge. It's huge. Yeah.
Cheryl, that must come up when you're thinking about advising people who want to gig all the time, like Sal did, and be on the road. Like, taking care of your body becomes a huge part of that, correct?
Absolutely, because it's well, just playing is an athletic event. So how we take care of ourselves as we play, but and posture, those things, you have to maintain that all the time. It's not just going to automatically happen. And so you're in those situations where you're on a tour bus or you're on a plane or you're just sleeping somewhere and you don't. So you have to make sure wherever you go, or you have a routine you can do in your hotel room or as you travel, because it'll beat you up, But all those practices will, when you go to play, you'll have that posture there. You won't have to work for it. It's just, that's how you are. So yeah, I think these are really important things that people maybe on the outside don't consider, but definitely as we're coaching young musicians to get that practice happening for them.
Yeah, one thing I love in addition to all of this that you bring to your teaching of the guitar and your labs and your ensembles is you also teach all of these other fundamentals in other departments. Like, so if you're listening to this, Sal is one of the few faculty at Berklee that teaches across multiple divisions. And I think you have this ability to say, like, coming in, like you're teaching playing, so you're teaching guitar, private lessons. You also develop the Mike Stern lab, a few other guitar labs that come right out of your guitar influences. But then you're also teaching in the liberal arts department, like the career development class. Like, what are all the things that people should be thinking about when they're looking to build the next phase of their career? And then you've also taught music theory
Yep.
in your training classes. So you are very aware of all of the building blocks in guitar playing, musicianship in general, and in your life that really have to come together in order for things to work.
Yes. Well, thank you. Yeah, and I really do enjoy doing all of those things. Yeah, you're right. It does give me a unique perspective on, it's. I just recently wrote an article on a blog for a friend of mine who is creating a business to help students get into the best music schools of their choice. And I mean, he teaches at Berklee, so of course he's trying to get everybody to come to Berklee. But
Good.
no, he's really trying to help students to figure out how to be successful in coming in. And one thing that I see in teaching harmony is how much students really do need to come in a little bit more prepared in knowing music theory. It can be very beneficial for them. And now I understand it because you have certain instruments, like if you're a piano player, you're going to be learning harmony from the get-go, versus if you're a vocalist, you probably have very little, if any at all, experience. But I do think it's important to develop those different areas of your musicianship. I think in order to get into a school like Berklee, but to thrive in a school like Berklee too. So yes, I enjoy harmony. I enjoy ear training. I enjoy performance. And I even enjoyed my little stint in the liberal arts department where I had Ian as a student. Ian was one of my students in the, what was that class? It was
I was hoping you weren't going to remember that.
professional development. Now, of course, Ian could have taught the class.
Yeah.
He should have been teaching it and I should have been learning it. He was my best student, I got to say. He really stood out. But, that was a great experience too, kind of looking at the business side of music. That's a whole nother aspect that people forget. Music is not just an art form, it's a business. And if whether we like it or not. So yeah, I mean, you know how it goes. When you teach, you end up learning more than you're actually teaching. So I feel like I learn more from teaching these classes than I think that students get. But yeah, it's all good. Yeah, I enjoy it.
So, Ian, I think this is a really perfect time for you to ask your question or
Uh-oh.
Yeah. So
Is he gonna get me
yeah,
back?
here it comes.
Look out, Sal. Look out. This is the revenge of Ian.
Oh, hey, I gotta go, by the way.
I have a class.
I need more coffee.
Okay, really quick, just a little light question here. What's
Oh.
something that students come to you as either, in your lab or your lessons, and they're asking questions about what they're playing or what they're working on, and you see something in them and you think like, well, what you really should be thinking about is this. Like,
Mm.
what's something that they should be thinking about that they might not think to ask?
Well, I think that's unique to every student, of course. But I think as an educator, you're trained to kind of find what they need to work on, And so that could be their time feel, what you guys talked about yesterday, the nervousness. I think Tim Miller put it in a great way, rushing is probably one of the biggest nemesis. If they're rushing while they're playing, if they're in front of the beat. It could be anything. So let's see, what's another example? It could be little nuances, like they're playing and they don't realize that they're tapping their feet out of time. I'm like, hey, do you realize you're tapping your feet like at a totally different tempo? You should probably try to just keep your feet flat on the floor there. And I probably do the same thing. I don't know. Sometimes you don't realize what you're doing. But I think we're trained as educators to find those places where we can help the student to get better. Yeah, John Finn helped me with that, because he had me teach his class. He had a very high level ensemble. And I went, oh my gosh, these guys are amazing. What the heck am I going to go in there and teach them, And John Finn said, he goes, listen, there's always something that they can learn. There's always something you as an educator will be able to see and to help them. So I guess to answer your question, it could be a myriad of things. But I think it is important to be a good teacher is to find those things and to help them hone in on, what they can grow in. So I don't know if that answered your question, but.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, cool.
As you're talking, Sal, I think a really important thing to mention is that it seems like in everything that you do and all of the things that you've done as you're looking back, you found some really joyful aspect of it that allows you to keep learning. And I think it's really important to mention that, maybe have you talk about it a little more, because I think a lot of people, especially as they're leaving school and they're thinking about what they're going to do next, they'll say like, yeah, if I was going to teach, I only want to teach what I do. I don't want to teach theory. That's not my thing.
Yeah.
But then there you are and you're teaching theory and you're like, hey, this is really fascinating. Like there's something in here that I'm learning about my playing or about the way people learn, or there's something that about each thing that you do, whether it's what you ideally thought would be an avenue professionally or not, you seem to grab the joyful thing that helps you learn. And I'm just wondering if you were always like that, even as a kid, or did you kind of come to that philosophy about music?
I think I came to that philosophy. And again, I think it's the genre that I created, the pay the bills genre. And I think it's why I really enjoyed doing the class that Ian took, what professional development class is, I think a lot of students can get discouraged because they're trying to figure out like, geez, how the heck am I going to really make a living doing this? Mm-hmm. And I saw a couple of different trends, years ago. It happened when DJs came on the scene, right? I remember that. Well, it started way back when the Mini Moog came out, actually. When the Mini Moog came out, everybody's going, oh my gosh, synthesizers, they're not going to need instruments anymore. Synthesizers can sound like all these instruments, and but that never was the case, right? Because a synthesizer is not going to take the place of an instrument. And then I saw it happen with DJs. When the DJ started taking over a lot of the work, musicians were going, "Oh my gosh, we're never going to work again," and these DJs are going to take over the world. And, that's not the case. That's not the case. And then, of course, we saw it happen when all the music started being offered for free on the internet, and a lot of artists were not getting paid for their recordings. So, so there was these trends that really, I think, sent a lot of fear and a lot of doubt in people going, geesh, I mean, will I even ever be able to make a living doing this, And what I found in my career is the way I can make a decent living is by creating as many income streams as I could. And I think studying at a place like Berklee is perfect for that, because you're learning so many different types of things. And if you can really hone in and use that to your benefit, you can create a lot of different income streams. I had a little recording studio in my house. I had some people coming over. I didn't know nothing about engineering, but I learned it, and, with my stylistic diversity, hey, if somebody calls me to do a classical gig, I'm not going to say no. I'm going to do it. I mean, it's not going to be Kim Perlak. I'm going to be using a pick, but I'll get through the gig and it'll be okay. It's going to work. And if it was a jazz gig, even though I don't consider myself a jazz guitar player, I'm going to do it, and so I think I developed that mentality, and I try to put that in my students too, to really, and I think that class was really good for that, because that was that period where a lot of students were discouraged by a lot of this music being put out for free. And, I would get questions all the time. How am I ever going to make a living? So I had to tell them, hey, there's a lot of different ways to make a living. I had a guitar student who was, great player. But what I learned about him was he had this incredible talent for effects. And I actually hired him to build this big effects pedal board for me. And he knew everything about the inside outs of pedals and this and that and what goes in what. And I have no clue about this stuff, but he knew it all. And I told him, I said, dude, you could get a job working for a high-level pedal company. I mean, they would pay tons of money to have a guy with your kind of knowledge. He wasn't even thinking that way. He was thinking of becoming the next Steve Vai. But he was like, gee, I didn't even think of that. And I think he actually went on to get a job in that field.
Oh, cool.
So, yeah. And so I think as educators, it's important for us to inspire our students to see beyond, maybe because of that little box I was in from 1980 to 1990, and Berklee kind of opened up my mind to see a lot of more opportunities and possibilities. I think it's up to us to help our students to see there's so much more opportunity and possibilities to work than ever. I don't care about the free music on the internet, the DJs, the mini moog. It doesn't matter. People are always going to want to hear music, and people are going to always need people that know how to help musicians to get their music out and all of that. So I think I see that as an important part of my gig. So yeah, I appreciate that, because I am like that. I like taking on new things, and I like getting in and getting my feet wet, and I enjoy it. It keeps things fresh, but it keeps me learning, and it's just a good thing for me. So
That's great. I think that ability that you had even at a young age to think about your playing and then all of the professional skills and musical skills that made up your playing and then that surrounded your professionalism, that has made your career and your teaching style. And I think it's really important for people to hear at this stage, especially in the pandemic, especially coming out of it. We don't know exactly what
yeah,
work in music is going to look at, but I think if if everybody can just keep listening to you over and over again, which of course they can, I think it helps you stay creative and helpful and to yourself and hopeful about what
Yes,
could
yes.
come, and you're starting to see possibilities maybe instead of roadblocks, and I think that's really
Yeah,
important.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, you bring up the pandemic. That's a big one. Um, it's interesting to see how different people cope with or have coped with the whole pandemic. And, you hear about the suicide rates rising, you hear about, the drug addictions and all of that and rising. And certainly, maybe if I were younger, I would have chosen a more destructive way to cope with it. But this time around, I was really happy. There is another way to do it. There's a more constructive way to handle these kind of adversities, and I really, it was hard. I got to say. I mean, there was definitely periods of frustration and periods of depression, but overall, I've tried to really maintain a kind of a silver lining attitude because there was a lot of great civil. I mean, as challenging as it was, and the people, dying and getting sick. I mean, what can you say about that? It's sad, but I do think that when devastating things like this happen, there is always opportunity for good to come out of it, and I think as a musician, for me, it's been great to get more time to practice. I learned a couple of new skills, which I was really happy about, like video. I didn't have a clue how to do video, and now I'm making these little videos, and it's cool, and Logic. I learned Logic. I didn't have a clue how to do that, and so I do think there is this silver line and connecting with people. I really felt like I was able to connect through mediums like this a lot more, which I think has been good, and not only around your immediate area, but all over the world, which is kind of cool, So, I don't want to minimize how brutal the pandemic was, but there's always a silver lining, and it's your choice. Are you gonna deal with it, cope with it in a destructive way or a constructive way? And you know, it's kind of happy. For once I did. I stayed pretty constructive. I don't know how I did it, but like I said, in my younger days, probably wouldn't have. But thank God, and but it's great to see the light at the end of the tunnel too. Coming back to school, oh man, that was so good. I mean, when you guys, offered who wants to come back, my hand was up first. I just couldn't wait to get back in to see flesh and blood, and so I've been really enjoying be back, and I know things are just going to get better from here. So, and I do want to say, I don't know how much time we have, but you guys have done really a phenomenal job through this whole thing. I want to let you guys know and give you a really special thanks because you guys, all of you, Kim, Cheryl, Ian, I think you've not only kept the morale of the guitar department at a solid level, but I think you raised the bar. I think people are happier. I think you're promoting the department in a better way. I think you're getting more stuff out there. So I see you guys doing that. I see you guys take advantage and grab good stuff out of this very horrible situation we had to deal with. So I'm very proud to be a part of this department, and proud to know you guys. So it's good. You guys have done a really, really great job.
Thank you. I think we are proud to know you. We're proud to
Thank
have
you.
you and all the faculty members. I think that right away that was something we all realized is like if we're gonna shepherd our way through this as a group, as a department, what we have is each other. Because that's all we have when we're not together is we know the strengths of each other. And
Okay, I'm getting a little emotional
I
here.
know.
Take it easy now. I'm starting to drip a little bit here.
Okay, all right. Well, but yeah, I think that I appreciate that so much, Sal. And I think you're right. I think there's so many things that we'll take with us, and some of that is being able to share these conversations with everybody, because honestly, these were the conversations we just have in the office. We'd make a pot of coffee in the office.
That's right.
We'd sit around it, and then we'd have these conversations together. And now, because of everything you said, that is so true, that we've learned we're able to share this with other people and in a much wider way. And so there's so many things that we found. We thought, well, if we did this, we could do other things. And so that kind of created our virtual campus and our way to keep everybody connected. And we've heard from alums, and we've heard from just
Awesome.
friends of the department and prospective students. And so I think we all are more connected,
I
ironically,
agree.
because of the things that kept us apart physically. Now we're more connected in a bigger sense. So it's really cool. Thank you for
One day at a time. One day at a time.
Yeah. So you're going to have to get out of your house and get over to campus.
Yes, I
So
got to go
what-
teach a jazz improv techniques class at 4:00.
So quickly, Cheryl, what's your final thought as we wrap this up so Sal can fight Boston traffic?
No
Something we
problem.
all do not miss.
I grew up here. I know all the ins and outs.
All right. That's the next coffee talk. Sal shows you where to park in Boston.
Oh, no.
Most listened to episode ever.
Good one. Good one.
Cheryl, what's on your mind?
Well, thank you for you got really deep in sharing, your struggles with your, feeling confident and performance anxiety and stuff. I know so many students and folks that follow us that are musicians that are not necessarily part of our campus are really going to appreciate. So thank you for sharing that. That was very helpful.
My pleasure.
And
Thank
just your thoughts about, creating melody and creating a career. Really, really super. It's like golden nuggets of information.
Thank you, guys. Well, it's been an honor and a pleasure being with you folks. This has been great.
Yeah. Ian, any last word?
Yeah, same thing as Cheryl. I really liked the way that the both of you mentioned how, relaxed the other seemed. I think it's like really important for students to hear, when somebody seems that they're comfortable in their playing, it doesn't mean that they naturally don't have these issues, but that they worked on it and they had the maturity to deal with that in a really great way. So I think that we all, we could all stand to hear a little bit more of that.
Good stuff. Thank you.
Beautiful. Sal, thank you so much
My pleasure.
for having coffee with us. And so coffee cheers to Sal DiFusco, Professor Sal DiFusco, Ian
Thank you, guys.
and Cheryl Bailey. And
Been an honor.
see you next time on Coffee Talk. Cheers, everybody.
That's good. Bye, everyone.